Now, every farm, every slaughterhouse I worked at, you sign an employee contract, and it says no filming, no photos, no cameras. If you're caught, if you take any pictures, you're fired. You lose your job. But it also said, if it's discovered that you're filming for the purposes of exposing animal cruelty, not only do you get fired, but you withdraw your legal right to personal privacy. That we can distribute your information throughout the industry to prevent you from infiltrating other farms and other slaughterhouses.
Geoff Regier is a Vancouver-based animal rights activist who spent 3 years as an undercover investigator working in farms and slaughterhouses across Canada with an organization called Mercy for Animals. Most recently, Geoff took his activism to the streets using chalk to write messages on sidewalks, and through his project called TV Outreach for Animals, where he brings a 39-inch TV screen, I guess like a big screen thing outside, and shows footage illustrating what animals suffer on modern farms and in slaughterhouses to whoever happens to be passing by. And so nowadays, of course, Geoff is socially isolating, as we are. Geoff has his companion, a lovely hen named Penny, who I watched a video of you digging Penny up out of a pile of excrement at a chicken farm in the Fraser Valley. So I'm interested, Geoff, thank you so much for taking the time today. And I'm interested in knowing Penny's story. I imagine she has changed your life significantly?
Yeah, she's part of my everyday life in a very, very positive way. I love having her in my life and having her around, yeah.
So what's the story? How did you end up, was that part of a Mercy for Animals thing where you were at this farm?
No, that was post undercover investigation. So that was part of, I guess you could call it an investigation in kind of like a different form, which was just going into chicken farms at night and documenting the conditions that chickens are made to live in. Actually, she's just, yeah, she comes inside. I'll show you what she looks like.
Oh, it's great to see her. Yeah.
I don't know if you can see.
There she is.
She's just on the windowsill right there. So I'll open the window and let her in.
Oh, cool. Hi, Penny. So does she just kind of come and go as she pleases?
Yeah. So she
there she is.
She comes inside when she, like, if I'm here, and I can open the door or open the window, she'll come inside. So, anyways.
That's beautiful. And she comes when you call her?
Yep.
And so if it's getting, I guess chickens are sort of programmed to head inside when it starts to get dark, so you don't have to sort of worry about that situation. She comes in when it's nighttime. Is that right?
Yeah, they all come in on their own. Like there's 8 chickens.
Oh.
Penny's the only one who gets to come inside.
Oh.
Another 7 outside, and then there's like a shed that they all go into at night. So yeah, you don't have to round them up. They all just go in, and then in the evenings we'll just close the doors, and in the morning just open it up, and they do the rest.
Right. Yeah. And are they jealous that Penny gets to come inside?
It's hard to say. There's like if you leave the door open, they will all come inside. And there's one in particular, Mary Chris is her name, who, if she sees the windows open, she's up there right away. She tries to get in all the time. It's always her, because she knows where Penny goes in and out. And so, yeah. I don't know if I would say they're jealous. Maybe they are. Maybe they aren't. They're definitely. They definitely see that it's something. They're very curious. I think it's something that they. It's an opportunity they see, and they're like, "Ooh, I want to get in there. I want to see what's in there."
But they don't pick on Penny. They don't bully her or anything like that.
I'd say no. they have their pecking order, and Penny's definitely at the bottom of the pecking order, but it's all been kind of established, so it's understood that, I mean, that's their hierarchy, that's how they operate, and Penny knows that she's at the bottom, so they don't get into like scuffles or anything. Um, but Penny gets last pick of anything outside, so she has to wait for everyone else to eat out of the feeder, and then she goes and eats. She doesn't, and that's just their hierarchy.
That's interesting. And I think, and I wonder how much we're sort of anthropomorphizing it, because I've always heard it described that way, as like it's a pecking order, it's a hierarchy. And but really, when I think about it, we naturally have ways of organizing ourselves, right? And when we think of human hierarchy, it's that one individual at the very top has all the power, is in control of everything and can boss everybody around. But I'm wondering if, like, within the animal world, is it more of a kind of a cooperative thing? It's just like sort of, I'm going to be the one who takes responsibility for keeping us all safe. I think a lot of it has to do with safety.
Yeah, I think especially with roosters particularly, like there aren't any roosters here, um, but yeah, at other farm sanctuaries where they do have roosters, you can observe them. Like roosters, they keep an eye out. They like if they see or at least a plane or anything that they might perceive to be a potential predator, they'll make the call, like the warning call, and everyone else will run for cover. Um, and even here, like the hens will, if they see something that they think might be a threat, um, they have like their kind of alarm call that that they'll make, and everyone is kind of on alert. It's actually kind of interesting though. I think um, they're pretty clever. Like I've heard uh, that sometimes roosters uh, they tell lies, or like the equivalency of a lie for a hen. And so what roosters will do is they, I guess, to garner favor with hens, they'll make some kind of vocalization to tell other hens, hey, there's a bug here in the grass, and a lot of times there is. But it's been observed that sometimes they do that, but there is no bug in the grass, and it's their way of trying to sneakily garner favor and deceive hens when they weren't offering them anything. And so there aren't any roosters here. I haven't seen them do that. But what I have seen is I have seen hens make the alarm call, and I've seen it when other hens are, maybe they're on a nest, and another chicken wants to lay the egg there, wants to be able to sit on the nest. And so the hen that wants to go on the nest will make the alarm call, hoping that that other hen will get off the nest so she can go on there. Uh, so I mean, so there's a lot more going on in their heads than most people give them credit for.
For sure. That is so sneaky, right? Sneaky guys and girls. And so when Penny comes in the house, is she kind of potty trained? Does she go back outside to do that, or just does it matter?
I wish. She's not potty trained. Like initially, you can get chicken diapers, and they work. Uh, and some chickens take to them. Penny, she really didn't like them, and but especially with Penny, it's not as big of an issue as it would be with other hens. She doesn't wear a diaper, but she's outside virtually all day, and uh, and but compared to most chickens, she hardly poops at all. Like I'm not gonna say it never happens. Like no, she'll poop on the floor if she has to poop and she happens to be inside. That's where that's where she'll poop. But she has a hormone implant which prevents her from laying eggs because she was having like when she first came, she was having a tough time. She was her calcium stores were depleted, and she wasn't able to lay eggs with a shell, or sometimes if there was a shell, it was just paper thin because she was so calcium depleted. So anyway, so she got a hormone implant, which it basically functions the same way as birth control in humans. And not having to produce an egg every day means that she doesn't have to eat a lot to produce that eggs, and not having to eat a lot means she also doesn't poop a lot.
So, and the hormone implant probably sets her system back to kind of what's more natural for chickens. It's not natural for chickens to lay eggs every single day of the year.
Yeah, it's this is one of the things that I think a lot of people don't understand about the cruelty of the egg industry is it's how we bred the cruelty into them. Like a wild hen would normally lay, I don't know, 12, maybe 15 eggs an entire year, just like any bird. Like they lay have a clutch of eggs in the spring, but instead of laying 12, 15 eggs a year, they've been genetically selected to lay between 300 and 400 eggs a year. And so that, I mean, that takes an enormous toll on their bodies. And
yeah, no kidding. And so there's other critters on the sanctuary that you're actually on an official farm sanctuary, or just kind of your place with animals that you've rescued?
yeah, I wouldn't call it an official farm sanctuary. There's no website. It's just you could call it a micro sanctuary, but there's no website. There's no we don't have volunteers come over, and because I mean there's not a ton of work to do. It's just a few rescue hens here.
You don't have cattle or sheep or any of that?
No.
Yeah. That's when it gets to be a lot of work for sure. And I was listening to other interviews that you've done, and the story of how you grew up on what was called a hobby farm back in those days. We would call it a hobby farm. Maybe there was horses and various animals there.
Yeah, there was cows, pigs, sheep, chickens, and we actually did have a pony when I was much younger. But yeah, it was a hobby farm, so it wasn't like the animal products produced on the farm. Like you would never be able to find them at a grocery store. It was basically it was actually the farm that my dad grew up on, and my parents' idea was they wanted to teach us kids to be hardworking, and living on a farm was their way of teaching us to be hard workers. And it was a 10-acre piece of property, so it also functioned by having farm animals on it. It made it so that like your property tax is dramatically lower. So if you make a certain amount of money, I'm not sure what the threshold is, but if you make a certain amount of money, you qualify for to be in a lower property tax bracket. So that was the purpose of it.
So you grew up with animals and you loved animals, and I like the part where you explain about the moment that you realized that the love that you had for the animals was really more about yourself. I've had that realization myself, and that's a startling moment, I think, when we reach that. Do you want to talk about that a bit?
Yeah, I think everybody, vegan or not vegan, like I mean, it's the same reason like cat and dog videos are so popular on the internet. Like we see cute animals and we just want to cuddle them, and you get like psychological. I don't know. You get like probably like a dopamine hit from seeing a cute animal. Maybe your brain releases oxytocin. Like we like it, we crave it. But like if you think about it, it's more about us than it is about them. And like I remember on the farm telling my dad that like we could get more cows, more pigs, more sheep. We could cram more animals into these pens. And I thought, oh man, that would be awesome. That would be just so so wonderful for me. Uh, Obviously, that I wasn't taking their interests into consideration. It was all about me. It was about how they made me feel when I was around them. But I'd never really thought about it too deeply.
Yeah, I think that's really true for a lot of us. You know, we're all kind of narcissistic in a way, and it's about how I'm feeling and how you make me feel or how that makes me feel. And it's a real shift in perspective when we start looking at them. There was a story on the news the other night. I'm in Victoria, and so there was a story about the horses that are not working right now. You know, we have the horse carriage situation here, and so they showed these horses on this farm, and they're eating. You know, they're not shackled. Every time we see them, they've got, all their gear on, and they're standing in either the heat or the rain or some combination on the streets, or they're, trying to wrestle with traffic to go through town. And there's a whole movement here to try to remove them from the streets, as there is in many cities. And it's quite the battle between the people who think, oh, aren't they beautiful, and look, they love doing that, they love working, they don't want to just be standing around in the field. And then when they showed this beautiful image of them on the farm, and they're obviously being well cared for there, but the commentary was about how, oh darn, they don't get to work this summer. And I thought, well, they're probably like really happy about that. I'm sure the horses are celebrating that they get a summer off. Um, and then they had a moment. Animal Alliance organization, I guess, had some response to the fundraiser that the owners of this business are doing to try to feed the animals through the summer, because they're not making any money. And I guess Animal Alliance wrote a letter to them, and all we got from the news media was that they were, what was the word they used? They were disgusted, or a word to that effect, at this fundraiser. And they didn't explain, what the letter was about. They didn't read the letter. They didn't talk to anybody from the Animal Alliance organization. And I wrote to them and I said, well, you know what? I bet there's more to it than that, because I know these people and they love animals, and they're probably just looking at it from a different perspective. But anyways, that's a little bit of a tangent. But the horse carriage thing, I think, is an example of how we think this is so quaint and it's beautiful and the horses love it, but we don't really know what the horses are thinking.
Yeah, and I mean, I've heard similar justifications made for like racing, and like especially like the chuck wagon races, like in at the Calgary Stampede. Like I remember reading an article where some apologist for chuck wagon racing said something like, "Oh, you people don't know these horses, they're just dying to get out of the stalls to race. They love racing." It's like I could actually believe that they might prefer to race than be in a stall, but I don't think that's because they love racing. I think it's because it sucks being locked up in a stall where you can hardly walk around. Um, Perhaps by comparison, um, getting a little exercise is better, but uh, one thing that seems pretty obvious: like they would way rather be free in a field, just like wild horses exist. It's not doing them any favors to lock them up, and then their only free time is being tied to a wagon. Like no, it's a pretty poor justification.
Yeah, I think if we really want to understand animals, we have to look at them in what their natural environment. And there are still some wild horses in existence, and there are some wild chickens, I think, still in existence.
Yeah, modern day either egg layers or broilers, they were selectively bred from jungle fowl, which still exists.
Right. So you went to work for a zoo when you were younger as well, which is another environment where we think, oh, we love these animals, aren't they cute? But they're in a totally artificial environment.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and the zoo is the same thing. Like as an animal lover, as a kid, obviously, and I lived almost across the street from the Greater Vancouver Zoo, so I started volunteering and eventually working there. And I mean, I wouldn't say like enjoying the taste of meat is a justification for farming animals, but I'd say like the entertainment value that someone gets uh, from seeing an animal confined in captivity is it even more poor justification. And obviously, uh, like at the zoo in Aldergrove, they had elephants, well, exotic animals that uh, did not evolve to exist in Canadian climate, especially like the winters. Like, like hippopotamus, like they did not evolve to to spend time outdoors in the winters here, and their pond is frozen over, and even if it wasn't frozen over, it's cold. Um, and if they were to say like, oh well, we give them an indoor area, it's like they're stuck inside for months at a time. Like that's not very nice.
Mm. So, at what point did you start to shift then and realize, what happened first? Were you vegetarian, vegan first, and then you started to think about the animals, or did you start to think about the animals and then, like, what made the shift away from the whole animal death culture?
Well, I had the I have the same repulsion to like you see an animal suffering. I don't care if you're vegan or not. You see an animal suffering. You see slaughterhouse footage, and unless you're a psychopath, you cringe. It's tough. It's tough to see. And so I had that, just like I think virtually everybody has. I didn't like on the farm. I didn't like seeing animals being castrated or having their tails docked or lambs being taken away from their mothers, desperately calling out to each other. And obviously, they're never going to see each other again. And obviously, if they're going to the slaughterhouse, that's a pretty unpleasant experience that they'd be about to endure there. So I had that, but that those adverse reactions to seeing that kind of suffering, but I didn't really think about. I didn't know. I don't think as a kid I didn't know there was such a thing as a vegan or even vegetarian. I'd never heard of that before. But I guess the initial, I went vegetarian first, and that was when I was 24. And even then, like we've been talking about how my love for animals was about me. I'd also say like going vegetarian, that was also about me because like I just come back. Well, I should say like as people, we all have like our own identities, and in general, we all like to think of ourselves as, hey, I'm a pretty good person. And as part of my way of feeling good about myself as a human being was doing kind of like humanitarian projects. So I moved to Ecuador for 8 months. I was involved doing like construction work, building clinics, and I was translating for doctors and dentists, doing on medical caravans into indigenous communities. And I feel pretty good about myself. I'm a pretty good human being. And then when my money ran out, I came back to Canada and started working a job and wasn't doing anything to feel good about myself as a human being. So I don't know why, but for whatever reason, I thought, you know what? It's not quite fair what happens to animals. Like, I think everybody who knows, like, okay, if you're eating meat, something not nice had to happen to an animal. Everybody knows that on some level. And for whatever reason, the idea of going vegetarian came into my head. So I tried it, and I told my friends like that I'm going vegetarian, and they said, "Yeah, right. You'll be eating meat again in 2 weeks." And if they hadn't said that, I might have been eating meat again in 2 weeks. Like I remember the first barbecue I went to, everybody else is eating hamburgers, and I wasn't vegan. I was vegetarian. I ate like a bun with mayo, lettuce, and cheese on it, and it sucked. And I was like, oh, in my head, I was like, oh man, I wish I hadn't told anybody that I had gone vegetarian. because then I could kind of slip right back into the meat eating ranks, and no one would know that I was a failure. So I would say I barely stuck with it. But like, I mean, with any bad habit that you try and break, it's hard at the start, and the longer you do it, the easier it is. Like, you kind of, at least for me, I imagined that being vegetarian and vegan would feel as difficult uh, as it did before I tried it, and at the start, than it would feel 6 months later, a year later, 5 years later, and so on. I mean, now it's obvious it's my new normal. But anyway, so yeah, I'm vegetarian, barely stuck with it. But yeah, it became my new normal, and then I was like, yeah, I got this. And then, so that was when I was 24. When I was 27, I stumbled across the documentary Earthlings, and that's when my attitude changed. Um, I mean, I grew up on a farm, but I wasn't. Um, it wasn't a dairy farm or an egg farm. Occasionally there was a dairy cow, but we weren't operating. We weren't producing milk. We weren't drinking any of the milk that a dairy cow might have produced. We weren't taking babies away from their mothers for the sake of stealing their milk, and we weren't killing male cows. Like all the things that are just standard in the milk industry, and obviously the egg-laying chickens we had. I never saw the hatcheries that they came from. I didn't know about male chicks being ground up alive, and like we weren't really connected to the commercial industry, so we didn't send them to the slaughterhouse. They died, I'll say, of natural causes, although they're pretty unnatural because usually they're related to the cruelty we bred into them. But they died. They weren't killed on the farm, but they died due to like their genetics eventually. But anyways, so watch the documentary Earthlings.
Can I interrupt you there and ask,
Yeah.
why did you watch it? I mean, I've known it exists for a long time, but it took me a long time before I would actually even watch it. What was that? When did you go, okay, I'm going to watch this now?
I don't know. I think I just stumbled across it randomly. I didn't know, like, in general, I like watching documentaries, and I just stumbled across it randomly on the internet.
Hmm.
I didn't know what it was about, and maybe if I did know what it was about, maybe I wouldn't have watched it. I don't know. But anyways, I pressed play, and I watched it, and I watched it all the way through. And after watching it, it's like, I'm out. That's it. I'm done. And it was actually going vegan after watching Earthlings was way easier than going vegetarian as part of like a self-improvement project. And I think it's the mindset, like say for me, say I tried going vegetarian to improve myself as a human being. If I failed at being vegetarian, it's like no big deal. I just let myself down. No big deal. But if you do it for the animals, and it's not about you. You're not just letting yourself down. You're letting down animals, the most innocent beings, in the worst possible way. And it just made the decision easy. Like, I'm not saying I didn't have a craving for cheese or something like that ever again, but you think about that cheese or that steak or whatever it happens to be, and you think about like, oh, poor me, I'm suffering, I'm craving that steak, and I'm not able to satisfy that craving, poor me. But you compare that to the suffering that was required to make that steak, like not even close. I mean, you gave your head a shake, and the decision becomes easy.
It does, and I think there's an awareness that it is an addiction. The whole meat and dairy thing, it's an addiction that we're trained from when we're very young. We become addicted to these substances, and it's like being an addict, trying to give it up is almost like there should be support groups, and thankfully now there are vegan support groups. But also, I feel like sometimes when I'm talking to people um, about the different lifestyle, I feel like I'm talking to addicts. Like they cling so hard, and I used to as well. That it's not that bad, or whatever the arguments are. There's all this weird brain rationality that goes on to cling to this thing that they know somewhere deep down. We all know somewhere that this is not a good thing. So, at what point did you meet up with the Mercy for Animals people? Because that's a jump into that world. I Nothing but admiration for you doing that. I mean, I can barely watch Earthlings even to this day, but to actually go and work in the animal agriculture and the slaughterhouses for, was it 3 years you were there?
Yeah, although I should say, like, it wasn't like 3 years straight, like most people's full time job. Like you do an investigation, and then usually you have some downtime in between, or maybe you're working on something else, some kind of uh some kind of like maybe research or some other work. Like I wasn't like inside a farm or slaughterhouse for 3 years straight. um yeah.
And that was, you met a Mercy for Animals recruiter? Is that how it worked?
Yeah. So um like when I first went vegan, I didn't know any vegans, and obviously no animal rights activist. I wasn't involved in that scene at all, and uh, there was work that I was doing that was fulfilling to me. I was involved with this camp that for kids with HIV or affected by AIDS, and so I enjoyed being involved with that. But then the group that I was working with kind of dissolved, this volunteer group, and then I was kind of left with like no fulfilling work to do. And so it was at that point, I don't know it was at that point that I looked online to see like, well, what kind of animal rights groups are there in Vancouver. And this is before there was anything like Anonymous for the Voiceless or DXC or the Save Movement. None of those things existed at that time, but there was a local group called Liberation BC in Vancouver, and they used to put on an annual event called Animal Advocacy Camp. And so I started volunteering with them, and then joined the board of Liberation BC, and they were putting on Animal Advocacy Camp. Really, I did virtually nothing to contribute to the camp because I just joined the board almost as the camp was starting. But anyways, one of the guest speakers that year was Twyla Francois, and at the time she was the director for Undercover Investigations in Canada. And she, just in conversation, like she said, for whatever reason, she said, "You know what, Geoff, I think you'd be a good undercover investigator." Maybe she says that to a lot of people just to see, just to see what sticks. Like maybe you got to ask a bunch of people, and some fraction of those will actually say yes. Anyway, she asked me, and I said no. I'd be terrible at it. I'm too sensitive. Like somebody else can do it. I get it. It's like someone needs to do it, but I'm the worst person to do that job. And she gave me a spiel about the enormous impact that doing that work has. And so after Animal Advocacy Camp ended, she went back to Manitoba, but I thought about it. And after a couple weeks of thinking about it I got more comfortable with the idea. And then I discovered, I think I do want to do undercover work. So I emailed her, and I guess the rest is history.
And so Twyla is this is the artist, Twyla, that made this calendar. Lovely calendar. I don't know if you can see that. I think it's
yeah.
It's ironic. I'm not sure the story. I love her calendar. I wish I got one last year too, and I sent a couple to friends. She makes them around Christmas time, and I love them. But I wish she put a description of what the picture is, because I know all her art is connected to actual real stories of rescue. And I don't know what this one is, but I love that we're in this situation with the pandemic, and I've got this woman. Can you see that? You can see that
Uh,
with a face covering. I mean, that's kind of ironic, right? So I don't know the story of why she would be like that or who these mice are, but that's a real live rescue of some sort, right? I'm guessing.
mhm,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So she makes these beautiful calendars, like Yeah, she's great. She's in Winnipeg, I think, right? Twyla.
I think
Oh,
so. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so then when you agreed to do this, do you have to go get hired though? Now you have to be like a regular guy. You're going to this place, this company, and you're going to get hired, and they don't know that you're an undercover guy, right? Is that how that works?
Yeah.
So you just go in and you fill out the paperwork, and they hire you, and then have you got like a direct line to Mercy for Animals in case they find out and they want to send you to the slaughterhouse as well? Or can you talk about how that works?
Yeah. I mean, it's you. I mean, you just apply. You just see what jobs are available, and you just apply for a job just like anybody else would. Like, I mean, I don't know. Like, there's no what would from their perspective. I don't know what the difference between me and anybody else who applies for the job would be. Like, they put up a job posting and somebody applied for it, and like,
Okay.
um, I don't have a tattoo on my forehead that says vegan. I'm just a guy looking for a job. Like, I need a job just like anybody else. So um, you just apply for a job, and wherever you get a job, that's where you're doing an investigation.
And then, so the investigation involves a camera. Do you have to hide that on your person, or how does that work?
Um, I'd love to go get into all the fun details, but I can't because
Okay.
I'm not like I don't want to give away um, co- trade secrets. I don't want to give the industry any insight into uh, into detecting these kinds of things uh, or strategies that investigators might use.
Okay. Fair enough.
Very general terms, I can say like, I mean, it's a pinhole camera. It's like it's tiny. Um, like it's so covert. Like if somebody was filming me, I wouldn't be able to tell.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay, so let's talk about what it was like inside there. It's because you did this work in Central America. I'm interested to know which organizations you worked with, because I've done similar work in that regard.
uh, I I didn't do any like animal rights undercover work.
No, no, but the humanitarian, like I was involved with a group called Pastors for Peace that brought humanitarian aid to Cuba, and I know that they also did some work in Central America, building schools and things like that. I don't. Was that? It was a different group that you were involved with.
Yeah, the group was called like HCJB. Now I don't remember what that actually stands for.
Okay. All right.
Um, but I mean in general, it was a I'm not a religious person, but I did grow up in a religious home, and it was a religious uh, organization, and yeah, at the time, I guess I was in the midst of a faith crisis at the time. I don't think I would have called myself Christian, but anyways, it was work, religious or not religious. It was work that I found meaningful.
It's interesting how much of the sort of charity work is done by church organizations. I'm not a member of any church either, but this group, Pastors for Peace, it's an incredible organization, and it's not a vegan organization, but there were 130 of us, I think, the year that I went, and they do this caravan all through the states, and we collect aid hospital supplies, school supplies, and break the embargo. Go to the U.S. border in Texas and say, we're taking this stuff to Cuba. It was the most powerful thing I've ever done as an activist. I haven't done undercover work. I'm sure that's more powerful. But I met vegans on the caravan because there were 130 people, and there was a small group of us who were vegans, and yeah, it was just a cool experience. And so having an awareness of what's going on, in Central America and Cuba and U.S. embargoes and U.S. infiltration and imperialism and all of that, I'm now thinking about the people that you worked with in the slaughterhouses. I know there's migrant workers, right, that come. Because of economic conditions in their own countries, they come to Canada or the U.S. and they are the ones that end up, I think, sometimes doing these what must be horrible jobs inside slaughterhouses and animal agriculture. Is that true?
Yeah. I saw a lot more immigrants in the slaughterhouse than I saw on farms.
Hmm.
And I think, well, obviously, like neither of the jobs are great, but commercial farms are. I mean, the way they operate, they don't require, like, you could have an egg barn with 30,000 chickens in it, and you only need one person to operate that.
Yikes.
But a slaughterhouse, you need a lot of people in there. There's so many different roles, especially if you're processing the animals. There's just it's a lot more there's a lot more, you need a lot more hands. And so there's like an egg farm, it might be just the owner who operates it with maybe their family or maybe a neighbor or something like that. But a slaughterhouse, they use a ton of people, and that's where a lot of the immigrants wind up.
And so it's not pleasant working conditions. There's no, I guess, social distancing going on. And would it be possible? I think I'm hearing stories about slaughterhouses having to shut now, and things are shifting because of the COVID virus. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I think I've heard a few slaughterhouses being shut down. I don't think it's. I think those few slaughterhouses were shut down just because they had their own outbreaks within them. Like, I think it's probably the same as like any business that has an outbreak. They have to shut down, whether or not they're deemed an essential service or not. Like, they have to deal with that outbreak. But I think my understanding is that if there hadn't been any outbreaks in the slaughterhouse, I don't think they would have shut down. I think they would have been operating business as usual, just like all of the other slaughterhouses currently are operating.
Right. Well, yeah, I know. I gotta hope. I mean, I've been listening to Dr. Greger and Dr. Bernard, and it seems so clear that we wouldn't be in this pandemic situation if people weren't insisting on consuming animals. And I was guilty of that for the first half of my life, and I understand it. But I'm hoping that people are understanding that we need to move away from this. So for the animals. And it has become a selfish reason now, also for ourselves, that if we don't move in a vegan direction and fast, and I think we were moving fairly quickly before this pandemic, but now we really need to do that. Otherwise, the next one, I heard Dr. Greger say, this is just a dress rehearsal. The next one will be bigger and stronger, and we may not survive. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, this is actually something that I've been thinking about a lot more recently. Like, I guess before COVID-19 was being taken seriously outside of Wuhan, China, like here in Canada and in Ontario, a lot of your listeners probably are familiar with Bill 156. And so this is an ag bill in Ontario being proposed that would make it illegal to do undercover investigations like what I was doing. And they're also proposing that criminally charging individuals who trespass and document animal cruelty or conditions on farms, and charging these people in a way that's much more severe than something like trespass would be treated in any other context. And the industry's primary justification for this is concerns about biosecurity. When I was doing investigations, I was thinking basically almost exclusively about like animal cruelty and neglect. I wasn't looking at it through the lens of biosecurity. But just thinking about this, like I recently wrote a deposition that will hopefully be read in Ontario relating to Bill 156. And like it's really difficult to take. I mean, it's pretty obvious to anybody from the animal activist community. Like, it's not about biosecurity. This is an industry that doesn't like the publicity they're getting. They don't like being shown what happens behind the closed doors of modern farms or slaughterhouses. It's not good for business if people can see what's actually happening. And so this is an attempt to put an end to that. But go ahead.
Well, I'm wondering what is meant by biosecurity.
So the concern would be that if, say, somebody goes onto a farm, maybe they're carrying some kind of disease that another animal could contract, or maybe there'd be some kind of cross-contamination between barns on a farm, say, something like that.
So rather than just saying we don't want people to be filming what we're doing here, they're saying we're concerned about biosecurity. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, that's okay. What it looks like to me, and here's why. Like, if they're really concerned about biosecurity as an issue, I'd say, like, why aren't they taking biosecurity concerns seriously? That when I worked on farms, like when I worked on the dairy farm, they have people drive just like you show up for work, that you drive onto the farm. You're not having the tires of your vehicle disinfected. Well, you're not even disinfecting anything. And that's not somebody coming from their house or from the city. Like, they had people who worked there who lived on and or worked at other dairy farms. Mm. If they're concerned about cross-contamination, they should be concerned about people who are actually coming from other farms. They should I don't know why they'd be concerned about people who don't live on farms, like animal rights activists who obviously aren't living on or working at farms. They should be concerned about people coming from actual farms, potentially bringing other diseases and spreading them. But they're not. They had people show up in their street clothes, people who, even just friends of people who work there, who would just show up unannounced. This was known to owners and supervisors. And they took no corrective action and seemed largely unconcerned. On farms, they have just the practices. Like, they give on a dairy farm, they inject cows with oxytocin, which it makes them let the milk down more. They'll release the milk if you give them this injection. These cows are sharing needles. Like, this would be obscene if this was ever done in a hospital. Like, it just wouldn't happen. Like, even somebody. This is why we have safe injection sites for people who have drug addiction, disease to be spread. And So you're just creating the perfect environment for disease to be spread. Never mind, and the place is filthy. There's, I mean, I don't know how much, like, if a cow produces many times more excrement than a human can, but obviously they're not using toilets, and they're living in their own excrement, and you can see it. Like, anyways, I could go on about the dairy, like in the chicken slaughterhouse. Like, you're hanging sick and injured birds. Like, you're not supposed to, like any slaughterhouse, you're not supposed to kill or slaughter an animal for human consumption if they're sick. But I was instructed to hang sick and injured birds on the slaughter line, and like, they have different ways of. They have, at the chicken slaughterhouse, they have two ways of stunning the animal, and one is controlled atmospheric stunning. So it's like, so they put the chickens in CO2 chambers until they pass out, until they're unconscious. They suffocate until they're unconscious. And so the animals that arrive dead, you'd have no way of knowing which ones. You could be hanging dead animals. You'd have no way of knowing if they were. You're hanging a dead or a live animal, an animal that was sick and died, had disease. You'd have no way of knowing. And these birds are coming. They're being trucked in through all kinds of weather extremes. If it's the middle of the summer, the chickens that are on the inside of the truck, furthest from the outside, they have the least amount of ventilation, and they die from heat exhaustion. In the winter, it's the chickens on the outside of the truck, and they die from exposure to cold. They freeze to death. Sometimes, like, an entire truckload of chickens came, they were just frozen solid. If it's like minus 30 outside, and they were outside for too long, they didn't just die. They died, and their bodies were frozen solid as if they had been in a freezer for however long it takes to freeze a chicken's corpse. And the ones that haven't died, there's lots that are just barely alive. You can't tell. Like, those ones are the ones that aren't coming through the CO2 chambers. If those are dead, then you can tell that they're dead. But then there's the ones that are almost dead, but they're still, like, they might blink. You can tell, like, they're not completely dead. So those ones get hung up. You don't know if they're sick, or if they're just one among many that are dying from weather exposure. I'm not even talking about this as an animal cruelty issue, which it obviously is, but just from a health perspective, the spread of disease. Even if you don't care about animal suffering at all, like, this is a health crisis. On egg farms, like, obviously you're driving to and from the farm. No tires are being cleaned, disinfected. Actually, on the egg farm, they have this for some of the barns, like, shower in, shower out policies. So you shower as you enter the barn, and then you shower as you exit, to supposedly prevent any cross-contamination between barns on the farm. While at the same time, they are cleaning the barns with, like, this motorized plow. The plow isn't being cleaned, sterilized, disinfected. It's covered in chicken excrement from the previous barns. Like, what's the point of having a shower before going in, or say, even if maybe you dip your boots in, like, some kind of disinfectant bath to prevent you from carrying something in from another barn? What's the point if you're taking driving another machine into the barns, into where the chickens are, covered in excrement from the previous barn and the previous barn and the previous barn? It makes no sense. It would seem to me that the biosecurity precautions that they take, they're for show. and not for being actually effective. Like when I was working as a chicken catcher, sometimes they had you wear biosecurity suits, sometimes not. When you did wear it, when they did give you biosecurity suits to wear, sometimes you wear that same suit from one farm to the next. So, and they want people who are documenting animal cruelty to be charged criminally because of the risk that they pose. These people are posing to biosecurity. Why doesn't the bill say anything about the biosecurity risks that the industry poses to itself on a daily basis? It's pretty obvious that the concern, like by far, the biggest biosecurity threat to the industry is the industry itself. It doesn't even come close to what an activist could do. Yet the bill says nothing about criminal charges for someone on the industry committing far more egregious acts, breaches of biosecurity.
Yeah, I don't know anybody who goes and works on a local organic plant farm that has to be concerned about biosecurity and having showers before they go into their garden and work with their plants in their backyard, or unless you're spraying animal feces, I guess, as fertilizer. That sometimes happens, right? Sometimes if we hear about a crop of spinach that has E. coli or something from California, well, that's not from the spinach, that's from the excrement from the local farms, right? So I'm wondering a few things. First of all, I totally get it. Like that these diseases are not being brought onto the farm. The diseases are coming out of the farms because of these horrific conditions. And who's overseeing this? Like, are there inspections? There was one, I think it was the dairy farm that you worked on that you were able to expose, where then the SPCA got involved after the fact, after you revealed what was going on, and there was a criminal investigation and stuff like that. But aside from, if we didn't have this kind of footage from Mercy for Animals and other organizations like that, is anybody who's watching what's going on here and exposing it?
I mean, that's the disturbing thing. Really, like, nobody, a lot of people don't understand that, like, there is no government oversight on farms. Like, if you talk to a farmer or anybody from the industry, they'll say, oh yes, we have codes of practice and rules, and they'll say we have inspections, and it's true. But what they won't say is that it was the industry that developed their own code of practice, and it was like that they inspect themselves. And I mean, if that's not conflict of interest enough, like when I was working at farms, or even in the slaughterhouse, although there is a food inspection agency who is supposed to be monitoring slaughterhouse. Anyways, every single inspection done was announced in advance. I would be given instructions to clean up the area, to place the dead animals out of sight. But even if so any inspection is not representative of what the industry actually looks like. But even if they do see something that they would deem as horrible, who's going to find out about that? They're not the egg producers of Canada is not going to knock on CBC's door and say, "Hey CBC, we got a news story for you. Come see how terrible we are." It's not going to happen.
Right, and they know they're doing something wrong if they have to ask you to clean up because the inspection's coming.
Yeah, and even the codes of practice are so weak. Like the codes of practice, if you ever read any of like the codes of practice for whatever industry, whether it's pigs or eggs or dairy or beef or whatever happens to be. It's always they're recommendations. So like it's not like you have to do this or you have to do that. There are areas that actually there are areas that do say are classified as requirements, but even there the language is so vague. So it might say if don't submit any animals to any undue suffering or something like that. It's like, well, what constitutes undue suffering? Or don't leave an animal, an injured animal, languishing for too long. Like, how long is too long? Is an hour
and then if they
too long?
right, and then if they so they issue this statement saying, okay, these are the recommendations. Then does anybody follow up to see if the recommendations are being put into place?
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't, even if you're doing an inspection, like you would, like say you see an animal that's a lame pig on a hog farm, say, and the requirement is to not to leave that animal suffering for too long. How would you know if you just show up? Like you'd have to be there for I don't know, say a week, and to see that continue, that animal just that you'd have to see that neglect, and then you'd have to try and convince, and I'll say a judge that a week, that's too long, that's too much undue suffering, even though it's not defined anywhere. It's the pitiful requirements that they have. I mean, they're not properly enforced, well, really enforced at all. But even if they were, it's just so pitiful. Like anybody who cares about animal suffering would be appalled.
Okay, so this goes back to something you said right at the beginning about how none of us would like to see animals suffer, that we all have a gut reaction when we see animals suffer. And yet there's these situations now where clearly people know that these animals are suffering. The workers are having to witness this animal suffering, and maybe they don't like it, but I guess they need a paycheck. And then the farmer, or whoever's overseeing the operation, they must know that this suffering is going on, but I guess they're making money off of it, so maybe they can put it aside. I don't think any of this would be happening if there weren't money involved. Perhaps that's what ultimately the corrupting thing is. But so when these guys get, exposed, like the dairy farm or the pig farm or the chicken farm, what kind of reaction? There's sort of there's this visceral reaction from the masses that are shocked and appalled, but they don't seem to want to connect it to their own personal habits often. And the media holds on to this story for a little while about, wasn't that horrible? And but then things, just go back to normal. So I don't know what my question is here, but how is this happening? If we're all good people, ultimately, how is this happening?
I think it's a great question, and like in one word, I'd say it's desensitization. Like for somebody who hasn't been desensitized to it, like you see footage, slaughterhouse footage, or you see any of these and the footage from these investigations that break, you're horrified. But to the people in the video, or the people who are working there, who see that every day, you you become desensitized. You lose. It doesn't feel like it's a big deal. Like even for me, like obviously, I went into the job as an animal rights advocate, and at the start, you feel bad. You have that healthy, empathetic, emotional reaction. You see someone suffering, and it hurts you because you care about that animal. You feel that you have that empathy. But the brain has a way of recalibrating itself. Like, okay, this is the new normal. Okay, I'm not going to make you feel this kind of emotional pain. your brain recalibrates. And like mine certainly did. And for those people, like I have to think that anybody who started working there, they went through a similar process. And even more so, like with somebody who grew up, say, on a farm, and that's all they've ever known. I mean, it's just so normal to them. And like the footage, the disturbing footage that comes out of these places, or I guess I'll only speak for the stuff where I work. You see it and you're disturbed, and you think to yourself, like, how could somebody be so cruel? How could somebody do that? The people there actually doing these things to animals, they have no idea that they're doing something criminal. They're not like if we're doing something that we know is wrong, like we're gonna look both ways. They're not looking both ways. They're they have no idea that they're doing something criminal. And a lot of the time, like actually I would say most of the time, it's employees doing their job as they are instructed to by their supervisors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the things that we do for our jobs, because our supervisors tell us to do that. Okay, so back to this Bill 156 then. I guess people are coming at this from a variety of different angles. I think there's lawyers on it and animal advocacy activists. And what is the current status of Bill 156, which it sounds to me is about criminalizing the people who are trying to expose the criminal cruelty rather than penalizing the people who are doing the cruelty. Is that about what it's about?
Yeah.
And what's the status of it?
I'm probably not the best person to ask, but my understanding, like it was unanimously voted to move on to the next stage of whatever the process is to pass a bill. I think with COVID-19, it's been shelved at the moment, just because, I mean, probably everything is being shelved at the moment. But yeah, like as you were saying, like you would think that if there's an animal cruelty problem on farms, shouldn't the industry response be to let's eliminate the cruelty. Let's change the way we operate. That's not the response. The response is to try and, instead of fixing the problem, let's hide the problem. And I can't think of a way that an example of how this is better exemplified in the last investigation I did, which was at an egg farm. Now, every slaughterhouse I worked at, you sign an employee contract, and it says no filming, no photos, no cameras. If you're caught, if you take any pictures, you're fired. You lose your job. And legally, they can do that. They can make that an employee requirement. You can't get in like legal trouble for that. They can just legally fire you for that. But the last investigation I did, which was an egg farm, it said that, just like every other place did. But it also said, if it's discovered that you're filming for the purposes of exposing animal cruelty, not only do you get fired, but you withdraw your legal right to like personal privacy. So your information, like your social insurance number, your name, your birthday, like all this information, it said you withdraw the right to having your information kept private in order that we can distribute your information throughout the industry to prevent you from infiltrating other farms and other slaughterhouses. It said all of that explicitly. And I think they wrote it like that for legal reasons, because I don't know if that would have held up in court. But if it was taken to court, laying it all out explicitly like that would be the way they would have to say it to give themselves the best odds of winning in a court case if something like that was ever challenged.
Mm. Well, I guess because of folks like you, brave people doing this heroic work of shining a light on what, again, I have to wonder if they're not doing anything wrong, why don't they want us to see it? I mean, I'm sure you people are happy to show pictures of their hobby farm, where the animals are at least cared for and looked after. y- you know, um, I guess it's getting more difficult because they know now that how people are getting in and getting this footage out. It's all very strange. It makes me think of Nazi Germany, quite frankly. But you've shifted gears then, or at least prior to the pandemic, now you're doing TV outreach for the animals. So it's just this massive big screen that you take out and then you show. Is it your own footage that you put up on the screen?
Uh, I used to use my own footage, and at the time, I thought like uh, that that would be more like impactful, because when I'm talking to people, I could say like, "Hey, look, like I actually filmed this. This is here. This is like an hour's drive from here. Um, this is what our this is how our dairy products are produced." Uh, but I stopped using that footage because it was, well, one, it was a lot more violent, and I don't think it got the reaction, the optimal reaction, because like it was basically just showing a lot of gratuitous violence that, um, and I think people, when people saw it, it would make them think, oh, you're just showing the worst thing you could find on the internet. Uh, and so, anyways, I stopped showing that, and now I prefer to show uh, only practices that are humane certified, because those are just as gratuitous, just as cruel, if not more cruel. Like, I mean, when you think about it, like I mean, as people, as a society, we tend to judge, like, say you see somebody punching or kicking an animal, and we judge that harshly, and we think, oh, that is terrible. Um, and we even call it criminal. But something like cutting off an animal, like a piglet's tail, cutting out their testicles, cutting off pieces of the ear, that's not criminal. That's humane certified. Like, I mean, you could ask anybody, what would you rather someone do to you? Punch you or kick you? Cut off your body parts with no painkillers. What would you rather? What is worse? And I think the answer is obvious. Yet the punching and kicking, we deem that criminal. Cutting off another conscious being's body parts, no painkillers, humane certified stamp on that. Like, anybody, any rational person can recognize that's not just torture. That's torture of the highest level. We would not inflict that on the worst criminal. Yet we do that to the most innocent beings on the planet.
Mm. Yeah, it's horrifying. And so, what kind of reaction do you get from people walking by?
Uh, a mix. I mean, it's pretty similar to, like, if anyone has volunteered with Anonymous for the Voiceless, uh, it'd be pretty similar. Um,
Except in that case, they have to walk up and look at the TV screen because they're just on little computers. Whereas in your situation, it's just there it is, and you can't miss it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Although, like in Vancouver, uh, we use 42-inch flat screens. So it
Oh,
is bigger. And actually, um, earlier when you read the description of like the TV outreach, and I think you said like a 39-inch screen, which that is actually what it used to be. But now we've upgraded to like these ultra bright outdoor industrial grade TVs that you can even see in direct sunlight, which is just makes the events that much better. So that we use those for AV and then also for so TV outreach. So the reaction is similar, although one difference is, like with AV, I'd say one of the ways that I'd say AV is superior to TV outreach is when you have a bunch of people like standing in a cube, and lots of people standing around, it sends this this, I guess, subconscious signal that, oh, I guess a lot of people are taking this seriously, and maybe I should take this seriously too. But if it's just one TV on a stand, or just one person there, it's easier to get angry at that person and to think of what that person is doing as wrong. But if you see a bunch of people doing it, it's like, oh no, I guess I should be taking this seriously, and this isn't some raving nut job on the street corner or something. Not that I yell or anything, but
clearly you're a raving nut job. It's quite clear. So people get mad at you because of what you're encouraging them to see. I guess that's probably how I would have been back in the day. I'd be like, I don't want to see that. How dare you invade my space here?
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, not very many people, but probably a little bit more so than at like an AV event. Although I'd say people are getting a lot better than they used to be. People, like, I feel like everybody knows it's wrong. You don't need to convince somebody that, like if you ask anybody, like, hey, is this fair to the animal, what we're doing? And everybody's going to say, no, that's not right. We shouldn't be doing that. Like the worst answers you get are people who will say, like, oh, we just need to do it in a better way. We need to do it in a more humane way. Right. But at the very least, people are saying what they're seeing on the screen, like, that is wrong. That is cruel. That's animal abuse. We should not be doing that. Okay. And it never used to be like that.
That's good. And then you can say, well, actually, this is what we consider humane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the advantage of using only humane certified practices, because it just ends that excuse.
And then, I mean, what people maybe don't think about is that they all end up at the slaughterhouse anyways. They might have a happy life, but they all end up at the same slaughterhouse pretty much, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's a bizarre way of looking at it, because like the way I describe it to people is like, okay, you have your conventional farm here, and you have your best of the best free range, local, organic, humane certified farm here. So on this farm, we subject the animals to fewer mutilations, less extreme deprivations in general. And then we say to those animals, well, because we harmed you less, I guess it's okay to stick a knife in your throat. Is it better? Sure. It's less cruel. Does harming an animal to a lesser degree make it okay to stick a knife in their throat? Like, no, of course not. Mm-hmm. But by comparison, I think some people can feel like, oh, I guess it's okay because I'm not as bad as the worst, even though the best of the best is still extremely cruel.
Yeah, and unnecessary. And thankfully, as you mentioned, when you went vegan, there were no animal organizations around. It was probably similar to when I went vegan. And I go to a restaurant, I'd have to explain, oh, well, I'm vegan, and that means that this is, I don't eat any, butter or milk, or and so certainly I've seen a huge change in just, I've been vegan for 20 years now, that I don't have to explain it anymore. People know what vegan is, and usually there's somebody who works in the place. They're much more educated about the products on their menus, and even shopping for shoes. Looking for like work shoes, for like sneakers to wear on a regular basis. And the woman I spoke with last year, she knew exactly which ones were vegan, which was very impressive to me. She wasn't vegan herself, but she was interested, and we had a good conversation about it. So and then just the number of products now. I went without cheese for like 15 years, I think, until thankfully Daya came along, and now there's a bazillion others. So there's really no good reason to be doing this anymore. And so that in conversations with people, do you find that this is shifting, that people are more interested in knowing how to become vegan? Do you have an outreach for that as well?
Yeah, I definitely, yeah, it's shifting. People are more interested. It's a lot more about the how and then the why now. Um, I don't know. In terms of like what I say to people when they ask me how, like, I know, I guess it's just kind of unique to that person. Like, what are their struggles? What do they find difficult? Like, I usually ask, well, what would be the hardest part for you? And um, but I mean but nowadays, like, I mean, the internet uh, has every possible resource you could imagine. Um, so, like, I don't know, maybe you direct somebody to Challenge 22, or maybe your favorite recipe website, depending on whatever it is they would find difficult personally.
Right. Yeah. It's really so easy now. There's really no excuse. But except so now we've got this COVID situation. Are you doing any street outreach? Is there anybody out there
No,
to outreach to? Not really, right?
I'm like, there are people out there, but I, uh, one, I think the physical distancing and social isolation, or not necessarily social isolation, but the measures that we're taking, they are important.
Hmm.
Um, and also, I don't want to. Uh, I feel like you might be doing more harm than good by going out and uh, and doing outreach, just because what it would say about maybe animal rights activists, and I wouldn't want to. Um, yeah, I wouldn't want to make people think that, hey, animal rights activists are irresponsible and they're not taking this seriously. So I don't want to damage the animal advocate reputation, but also I think it's a good idea to practice physical distancing.
Absolutely. And so there's other ways we can do activism. You mentioned that you've submitted something around Bill 156. We can all contact our government officials about that. And social media. Do you have any other suggestions of how we can stay active?
Um, I have kind of mixed feelings about this. I haven't been doing like the kind of chalking stuff that I usually do, but I mean, if you're going out for a walk anyways, I don't think it's a big deal to write like film Dominion changed my life on the sidewalk. I don't think it's um if you were going out for that, just for that purpose, then it's like, okay, maybe I might not. Um Other than that, I know, I guess it would depend on each individual's skills. Like, uh, maybe you're great at video editing, or like, that's kind of what I've been thinking about lately. Video concepts, um, and I mean, doing a bit of research. There's a lot of stuff I don't know. Um, but yeah, like the kind of the staples of the activism work that I think everybody has been doing has been kind of put on hold. So, but I think there's a lot we can learn. Yeah, and as you said, sharing stuff on social media, and there's especially a lot we can learn related to COVID-19 and the emergence of new infectious diseases, because this is a whole nother angle that most of us haven't even paid attention to it until now. Uh, I never thought of it as an angle to work on animal rights.
Mhm.
Um, it was kind of, usually it was like, it's the health, it's the environment, and the animal cruelty. But now we've got a fourth. Um, there's lot to learn there.
There is, and also I would like to add that in addition to sharing information, I like to just go comment. You know, go to some other site, a YouTube that I like, that maybe isn't about animal rights, but it's about, politics or Central American, what's going on in Cuba or whatever, and comment in there, right? Because you've already got a captive audience that are concerned about maybe human rights or environment or other issues. And I've just dropped links to Dr. Bernard has a little 11-minute video about the history of influenza and how it all has to do with poultry processing, and just a little, not being nasty, but just a little comment. Oh, I don't know if you knew about this, but right, and sort of because I find as an activist for peace and social justice and environment before I was vegan, I find for some reason those are the hardest people to reach. My activist friends who are very reluctant. Maybe they're vegetarian and they don't really understand. They were like how I was thinking that, well, I'm a nice person, I'm a vegetarian, I'm doing everything I can, and I'm doing all this other work for human rights. And I find that's the most challenging group for some reason. So I like to kind of drop in there and just try to leave little comments. I don't know. I was surprised to hear that you're chalking. You did a lot of chalking, just saying the film Earthlings changed my life, and I used to see that and think, oh, that's really nice that he's doing that, but I don't know if that's going to have any impact. But it actually has. You've had people come and say that has impacted them. So we never know where.
Yeah, the obviously like the goal, like do I really care if people know that a film called Earthlings changed my life? No, I like that by itself is just kind of useless. But if I can get somebody to watch the film, like that's huge. Like that's what made me vegan, and that's what has made a lot of people vegan. And so if you just I would encourage anybody to use that. I don't own that. I intentionally just chalk. Actually, I switched to the film Dominion, changed my life, which for me it was Earthlings, but I mean Dominion is kind of like Earthlings 2.0. But I think just the way that we are as humans, we don't like to be told what to do, and we don't like to be told we're doing something wrong. We all have our identities as being good people. I think that's probably why your friends who are doing good work in other domains maybe feel more defensive, because they have this really strong identity of like, I'm a good person, I'm doing these good things. And when she brings up this veganism stuff, she's kind of implying that I'm not a good person, but no, I'm a good person, so I have to be really defensive about that. But with writing the film Earthlings Changed My Life, or the film Dominion Changed My Life, you're not telling anybody they're bad. You're not even telling them to go watch the film. Because I think I would be resistant to somebody telling me to go watch a film. And so I very intentionally, I don't write free on YouTube or provide a link or anything. Because when you do that, it's basically telling them like you want them to go to this website. It's just up to them. They can look it up or not. And just the power of watching a single documentary, the power that I can have on a single person is huge.
It is. And there's another one from Joey Carbstrong now called Violated. Have you seen that one?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's all about the specifically the reproductive portion of the process. So how they get the semen out of the bowl, and even like shrimp are artificially inseminated, and it's on YouTube. I recommend it. Yeah, but people have actually said to you that they saw your chalking, and then they went and watched Earthlings, and then now they're vegan.
Yeah, that's I mean that it's that kind of story that really makes your day. Because I mean you write it all over the place. You write it wherever you write it, and everyone who reads it, like, you don't know who they are. Like, what are they like? You're not going to meet 99% of the people that read it, and of that nine of all the people that read it, some small fraction of those are actually going to watch it, and of all the people that watch it, some small fraction of those are going to be change their lives as a result. That's still, I think, a pretty big number, or a decent sized number in the end. But yeah, there's a couple of times that I met people who weren't in the animal rights community, and maybe kind of, I guess maybe some of them still aren't. They're just vegan on their own, and they kind of do their own vegan advocacy at their work and wherever it is in their circles. Um, but say you're doing a cube of truth or something, and you like came across somebody who stopped and said, like, yeah, actually I've been vegan for a couple of weeks now. And it's like, dude, that's awesome. What made you go vegan? And I was like, well, I saw somebody had chalked the phrase, the film Earthlings changed my life. And so went home and watched it, and had my wife watch it, had our kids watch it. And so we're all vegan now. And you have to think that you're only ever going to meet a tiny fraction of the people who were actually impacted by that. So I think I think chalking can be one of the most underrated forms of activism.
Super simple, and there you go. And we have to remember that every second of every day the animals are suffering, and so whatever we can do, that's how I feel about it, without alienating people. You got to be selective about these things, in workplaces and such things. Got to be careful, but anything that we can do that in an effort to educate people. I really believe that if people are educated, they'll make different choices, and then things will change. So we've spent a lot of time here talking about a lot of different things. And how's Penny?
She's great.
She's still outside?
I don't know if I think she might be outside now.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And that what an amazing story. And thank you so much for spending time today. And do you want to finish with anything? Do you have anything in close?
I don't feel like I have anything, any like prepared inspirational message. If you have any questions about anything you've heard today, or like, you can feel free to send me a message on Facebook or Instagram or something. Like, my name, it's probably be in the description of this video, but my name is spelled Geoff, and then Regier, Regier. Do you have any questions about anything you've heard here, or future activism that you might want to get involved in? I'd be thrilled. If you're not vegan and you're watching this, I would be especially thrilled to chat with you and answer any questions you might have. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, I guess you're in a good space with your hens and your critters. You're able to get everything that you need there.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, and so we'll continue to socially isolate. And it was really lovely to meet you. And thank you for everything that you're doing for the animals.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.